Welcome to Nudge and Boost for Better Living with Dr. Bob Crow. The purpose of this series of broadcasts is to share proven strategies you can use to build happier and more successful living at home, work, play, everywhere, all the time. And now your host, Dr. Bob Crow.
Hi, this is Dr. Bob Crow. I hope this is a good day for you. I know tonight and tomorrow can be made even better by applying information offered in this series of broadcasts. You've heard before, if you've listened to this series, that my background is in the science of behavior, and I have about 30 years of applied experience using the principles from that science. In this show, it is my intent to share with listeners rules from science and lessons from derived from good sense about how to use the principles that are available to us to make our personal lives more successful and more positive. I've been calling those events in our environments that tell us what to do or cause us to do a behavior, I've been calling those nudges. So nudge comes before behavior. There's quite a bit of publication out and around about nudging, and in fact, there's a book entitled Nudge, very popular, sold about 750,000 copies. It's currently influencing the governments of Germany, the Netherlands, United Kingdom, and even, to some extent, the United States in using what they are calling behavioral insights to design and conduct programs of national scope. The primary concept, method, style of operating on behalf of more improved national programs is called nudge. Well, in my experience and training in the analysis of behavior, I recognize that nudges actually get their power from a history of learning, and it's the boosts for behavior that causes nudges to have their strength. You've heard that before, you're going to hear it again, but today I'd like to take a little bit of a divergent look and tell you that my interest in sharing, nudging, and boosting so that you might use them as tools to improve your daily and living and style of living. I'm announcing them on a website where the book is described and can be purchased, but possibly more interesting is on the Facebook page for the book. So you could visit Facebook at Nudge and Boost and find posts. I've posted about 36 short paragraphs that are illustrative of and explain nudging and boosting in terms that I think are helpful for readers. Now I mentioned there are about 36 of those posted. One I posted this morning I have before me, and I'd like to read it to you so you can get a feel for what is on Facebook at Nudge and Boost, and you can get another perspective on what I'm trying to share with you. Here is this morning's post on Facebook, Nudge and Boost. A very constructive assumption for making our lives better is to act as though everything we do is behavior. Then, increasing our successes and solving our problems can be more effective by applying the laws of nature that establish or alter behaviors. Those laws relating to learning and doing can be found in the science of physics, biology, and behavior analysis. We move in a physical world and live according to biology, and learn and do in accordance with the principles found in the science of behavior. Key among principles of behavior are those related to factors occurring before and after everything we do. I call these powerful factors nudge and boost for ease of communication. You and everyone can use strategies of nudging and boosting to bring about more successes and more happiness. And in this post, I invite you to see the website for the book, www.nudgeandboost.com, and I prompt readers to like and share that post that I just read to you. And I invite visitors to the Nudge and Boost Facebook page to review the previous posts for more about nudging and boosting for better living. Let's look back at that first sentence. It's a pretty crucial foundation for moving toward you, others, adopting a behavioral, logical approach to better living. The first sentence, a very constructive assumption for making our lives better is to act as though everything we do is behavior. I put emphasis on act as though everything we do is behavior. It took me many years to practice and arrive at the conclusion that, in fact, everything that humans do can be explained in terms of physiological, physical, and behavioral principles. Saying everything we do is behavior is a very valuable assumption for going forward to use the tools that are in my book and we're talked about here in this radio series, and I use the common terms nudge and boost to communicate them, I think, in user-friendly terms. If we struggle with whether or not everything we do is behavior, it just wastes time that could be used in actually making positive change. Let's think about it for a moment. So you're out there saying, everything I do isn't behavior. I think, I have emotions, I have dreams. Those are all behaviors. What else are they? Are they physiological manifestations of nerves firing? Likely. But you express them to me and others in terms of your physical posture, the things you say. You think, yes, without speaking to another, and something is happening in your central nervous system while you're thinking or creating or sad or depressed or highly motivated or less. But we observe them, and you can, as behaviors, you can recognize, I had an idea, and you can reinforce it. You can say, I'm feeling depressed, and you can adopt some behavioral procedures to make yourself more happy. That's probably enough for today on that kind of distinction, because the point is that by adopting the assumption that behavior is everything we do, then you can go forward with what we know in behavior science to improve everything you're doing and those about you. In an earlier show, I pointed out the primary conceptual framework found in behavior science called the four-term contingency, which is comprised of motivational operations, nudges, behavior, and boosts in the terms I'm using here. So we have four terms: the motivational circumstance of a person, what is happening in their lives to indicate what behavior should happen, the actual behaviors they do, and the consequences following them, which might be boosts, where boosts strengthen behavior. Now, given that we assume that everything we do is behavior, then everything we can deal with all those everythings with the four-term contingency I just mentioned. We can understand, explain, and deal with behaviors by looking at their motivational circumstances, the nudges in the environment that came before the behaviors, the nature of the behaviors, and the boosts that followed them. This, armed with these conceptual notions, you can approach such matters as improving your child's study habits. You can say, what are the motivational circumstances that are present when the child should be or is studying? What are the nudges that cause them to study? What are study behaviors? And what are the boosts that can follow the child doing a good job of studying? That same four-part view of all of our behaviors that we want to deal with, like going to the gym or eating better, all can be approached by logically using the behavioral matters that I've been mentioning. It's time for a break now. We'll be back in a moment. The Writers Alliance of Gainesville promotes, encourages, and supports aspiring and experienced regional writers. Through activities of informative meetings, workshops, and writer support groups, they encourage writers to rise to their potential. Visit their website at writersalliance.org. Alachua County Library District will host its third annual author series featuring renowned and emerging authors. Each author will speak, answer questions, and sign books. I put myself among the emerging authors. For more information, visit the website at aclib.us.
And now back to Nudge and Boost for Better Living with Dr. Bob Crow.
Good news, chariots come, good news, chariots come, good news, chariots come, and I don't want it to leave me behind. Good news, chariots come, good news, chariots come, good news, chariots come, and I don't want it to leave me behind.
We are back, and we includes Quincy to my left and Dr. Bob Crow. As is our usual format, Quincy's and ask me questions that I don't know where he gets them, and I'll try to answer them in some reasonable way.
I get them from your book.
Oh, that's nice.
No, it's very interesting to read. How long did it take you to write that?
About 4 years.
Yeah.
The original target was actually practitioners, more or less behavior modifiers, and maybe teachers and school psychologists, where I wanted to share with them lessons that I'd learned over years of being in those circumstances. It's one thing to learn the rules in college, and it's a very different thing to go out and apply them. And then I wanted to share with practitioners lessons for being more effective in those settings. And then as more people read it and reviewed it, they said, gee, I'd like to know more about the principles of science. And I translated them after a while into Nudge and Boost.
So where'd you get the background research material?
From my life.
Okay.
It took me about 9 years to get my PhD, and so during that time, I did a lot. I was in the coursework, but researched with a variety of animals.
Thought you were saying they were both the same.
Yeah. Well, humans are hard to work with. They don't show up very reliably, and they want money or something. Pigeon is right there, ready to go, and you reach in the cage, and they work for 3 seconds access to grain.
Give them a piece of corn, and they're ready to go, huh?
That's it, yeah. They like it ground up. So then my first job was as a problem solver in a large school system.
Mm-hmm.
And I went wherever my boss was convinced it was a serious problem. Most of that turned out to be elementary school, although a little bit in junior high and a little bit in high school. I'd go and see what really the problem was. It was always different than the referral described. And then invent some intervention that would remove the problem. And I always tried to install something in place of the problem that was positive. In fact, that's a major point I'd like to make with you and the audience, that we should really put much more emphasis on deciding what it is we want. What do you want politicians to do? How do you want policemen to behave? How do you want your friends to interact with you? How do you want your child to behave in ways that build a better life for them? Less emphasis on what you don't want, more emphasis on being precise about what you do want in observable, measurable terms.
So we're thinking the wrong way.
Yes, really. Mm-hmm. It's most common for people to say, complain about excesses and absences in behaviors.
Why do people complain? Because it does no good.
It really doesn't do good in solving the problem, but it has some reinforcing properties to it that we could examine, but it's not best use of our time.
Yeah. Complaining has a useful purpose?
Only probably socially there's some useful purpose to it, that others gather with you and lament with you and possibly endorse that your complaining has a foundation.
Okay.
But it isn't solving problems. We look at the news and get on Facebook and hear people at the coffee shop, if they're talking to one another, which they probably aren't, complaining. They said, this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad, and this is bad. And 28 million people lose this, and 48 million people lose that. And students are dropping out of high school, and not learning mathematics, and blah, blah, blah. But what do you want? Well, that you want kids to stay in school. You want politicians to do things that are constructive for our country. With a little bit of translation, you could actually figure out what are the behaviors that should be done in order to arrive at the outcomes that we desire.
Well, tell me something. Aren't those behaviors well known, but there's concerted effort not to follow those rules to use it as a controlling factor for others?
I say no. That man on the street, most people are not accustomed to first translating what they're talking about into observable, measurable behaviors. That they say loyalty. We want people to be loyal. We want workers to be reliable. We want higher productivity out of workers. We want kids to learn. Well, those are nice labels, but they are not in any way descriptive of the behaviors that arrive at those labels. If you want kids to learn, then break it down in behaviors. What is learning? Well, learning probably starts with being, attending, staying in a learning environment, but then engaging in an environment, in the learning environment. They have to have materials, they have to observe the teacher or other people who are instructing them. They have to do the behaviors that the instructor is telling them to do. Now, the instructor has that label, but that isn't descriptive of the behaviors they do. The instructor should be one who presents a model or offers materials that the student should interact with, and they should be providing nudges and boosts for the students doing those things. The message is we have to get more precise in measurable, observable, measurable terms. Loyalty is not a set of behaviors. Loyalty or patriotism or productivity have to be translated into measurable behaviors. Productivity is being at the work site, getting the work materials, and dealing with them in certain measurable behavioral ways that arrives at a product. That's what a supervisor should be able to observe, and supervisors should be boosting desirable productivity behaviors in the workplace.
Which age group should you start working with folks to get them on the right track?
At birth or just before. That little kids are malleable, wonderful little humans that is easy to love and appreciate most of the time. And from the moment they're looking around them after birth, they're learning things. They're taking in stimulation. They're feeling cold or warm. They're being cuddled, or they're maybe beginning to nurse. From that, during those moments, they are learning. And every second of the rest of their life, they're learning. And they're learning, really, through nudging and boosts. They are not very formulated early on. Early on, for example, a kid makes a sound that is not a word. But the parent looks at them, or caregiver looks at them, and probably touches or picks up or begins nursing. So the child has emitted a behavior under some personal circumstances. They're cold, or they're warm, or they're bored, or they're hungry, or something. So they're in a certain state of motivation and nudging by the input that's coming to them from around them. They do something, and something happens after it. And that's what I've mentioned as motivation, nudging, behavior, and boosting. They're from every moment of all our lives, we're always experiencing that same thing. That's a rule of nature, like gravity. So starting early, the child is learning things. They should be, in a stepwise manner, learning vocabulary, and later on social interactions, and later on problem solving, and relating to their world around them. And eventually they enter maybe preschool and kindergarten and so on. And they're on a trajectory of life where some things are encouraging them to be stronger people and more prepared for a history of success in career and work and community. And some things are taking away from that. Nutrition, social interactions, models, mentors that they see. All those things are adding or subtracting from that trajectory towards success. So you start instantly, and it continues forever.
Tell me something. Teachers are really important in this process. Why don't more teachers practice it?
Practice nudging, boosting.
Yeah, because it's pretty obvious that this works.
It does work, and they do practice it in varying degrees of how explicit they are. A teacher may come from a program that even has classes in applied behavior analysis. They may learn things like pinpointing behavior definitions and objectives, and making boosts that different consequences that are supportive available when that student is on task and performing well. If they do not have that explicit, then they might have implicit instruction. where more traditional education psychology classes might encourage teachers to look for improvement and show recognition, attention to students who are striving for or showing excellence. And then it could be even less obvious than that, and not be systematically available in the teacher's preparation.
Are there any school systems that actively use this as an official teaching method?
There are some. We are back.
School systems
and
around
we
the country, very
include
few.
Quincy on my
And
left,
some
and
buildings,
my homes,
Dr. Bob.
few
Tell me a little bit more
that,
about your book.
have,
When you were
formally
putting it
established
together,
positive behavioral
where did you get your
systems
source material
to
from?
support students in learning
From my
and,
work life.
being good
No,
citizens in
no
school
one
and
particular
in fact, in
area
their community.
or one line of
It's
thought?
not terribly widely spread.
I confirmed a lot of
similar
thinking
to my
about
earlier comments that
presenting
behavior is
the
everything
principles of
we
science
do
by
and looking at articles
you have to
and
learn
back at
to love it.
textbooks. That notion,
particularly
yes,
that is part of the
behavioral
problem
textbooks.
for
There's
adoption
one
of
that appeals to me a
behavioral
lot.
methods.
That's school-wide.
Pierce and
It's,
Cheney.
It's
sort of the
basic
actually
behavior
science
analysis
and
book,
behavior
Pierce
and Cheney.
It's controlling everything.
But,
humans do.
primarily
Primarily, I
I
was
take
drawing
a
on my
brief
own experience.
break.
In fact, I call the book a semi-autobiographical novel on using the ABCs of human behavior.
I can tell as I read it, I can feel the first person narration in your book.
Yeah, most of the characters are me. it
Different
is
stages of your life?
autobiography. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, okay.
And, one of the renditions of the book was chronological. So it's just, this is me in graduate school, and I did this and that, and then this is me in the school system, and then I did this and that, and so on into. I was director of Human Development Center for over 20 years, and I was head of the Department of Interdisciplinary Human Studies for at the same LSU Health Sciences Center. So I have a huge storehouse of examples to draw on, and I would draw on those to illustrate a principle, but I often, as you prompted earlier, looked back at different sources to confirm that I was representing the principles correctly.
I noticed you draw a lot from your military experience too, don't you?
Yeah. Yes. I went in the Army as a medic, and later went to infantry officer training and came out a first lieutenant in the infantry. So I experienced a lot there from enlisted perspective and officer perspective, and experienced a lot of training. That officer training, it was 6 months, and much happened in it, and a lot of it was behavioral in nature, whether they expressed it that way or not.
I was about to ask, don't you think that they use nudge and boost in a military way?
They absolutely do.
Mhm.
And they do it very explicitly, for example, in the training of radio telephone procedure, RTP, where they would start with a very easy lecture discussion and move into role playing to the point that finally at the end, working on calibrating a radio and talking to people around the post very comfortably from different radios, like in tanks or armored personnel carriers or what have you. So and I'm sure that was done explicitly. Some of the workbooks they used were absolutely programmed instruction, just like Skinner and others described and used. And then other places, we were treated very behaviorally, I think, certainly without the practitioners recognizing it. For example, during training, sometimes outdoors it's cold, and they'd give us a break, and we'd want to huddle around the fire pits to get warm. But often the sergeants wanted people to go do things like move ammo dumps from here to there, ammunition boxes. And they would come into the break area and say, I need eight guys to move the ammunition boxes. And then you, and you are now volunteers, they'd say, you know. And the guys who were smoking would hold a cigarette up, just pointing it at the sergeant. The sergeant, oh, not you. So if you were smoking, then you avoided hard work and movement away from warmth in a cold environment. See, if you did not smoke, then you got punished in having to do extra labor and being away from any opportunity to chit-chat or be warm.
My next question, are you a smoker?
I am not a
You
smoker.
worked a lot, didn't you?
So yes, I was punished. I was punished for not being a smoker. But I saw guys carry cigarettes and light them in break areas just to escape being volunteered.
Smart.
Yeah,
Okay.
and very behavioral. And behavior analysts would say that, and you listeners, I hope the heck, it's by now you can see, oh, there were contingencies. If you behaved one way, these things happen, and if you behave another way, other things happen. That's the way life is, and knowing that, listeners, all of us, can arrange it. If you want behaviors, then arrange for contingencies, boosts, so that they are strengthened.
The process of getting published, was it difficult?
Was
Getting published.
getting published, it was fairly difficult in that first I had to write it.
Okay.
And then I benefited hugely from a lot of support from the Writers Alliance of Gainesville.
A lot of revisions.
Same.
A lot of revisions.
A lot of revisions. I was a member of a pod there. I still am, and it's a wonderful social and technical support.
Who are they?
Becky,
No. The name, you
Sandra,
said the name
and
of,
Patty
and the,
are
name,
my
the name of the group.
the name of the group
Oh,
in which I'm a member and the pod is
Yeah.
a part is the Writers Alliance of Gainesville.
and the members
So anyone
are,
who's interested in writing should be joining. An author or a potential author should join the Writers Alliance of Gainesville.
How would they do that, or do they know how to do that?
I imagine they know because
Okay.
the Googles know everything.
Yeah, okay.
So a listener can just Google WAG
Yeah.
or Writers Alliance of Gainesville, and it'll pop up. And it's the way to go. And the pod read my writing and shaped it up. And so that was the primary step toward having a publishable product. Then the issue then is how to get your electronic files put into the form that a publisher will take. And I used CreateSpace as the publisher, and I used one of my professional acquaintances who has the technical skills to transfer my files into CreateSpace acceptable files.
What type of critique points do they make in your group?
Oh gosh, they critique everything.
Like the fonts, the
well-
style of writing,
well,
the
take,
verbiage, or what?
They fortunately they do a lot of boosting,
Mhm.
really, and they do a lot of technical review about grammar and syntax and so on. That I'm not trained in it. I'm used to reading and speaking in class, but not writing. So that they were very nice about looking at my writing and shaping it so that it was more formally correct and clarifying. And the one thing I've mentioned today and in other broadcasts is the notion of contingency,
Mhm.
that there's a relationship between a behavior and that follows it. And it's so behavior happens and something follows it, always. You know, I say hi to you and you say hi back or look away. And what you did affects what I did. When I said hi, you behaved either in a way that boosted or did not boost my saying hi. So my saying hi will increase or decrease as a function of what you did, and that is a contingency. My behavior is followed by a consequence. That's a contingency. But that is just an incidental one. It just occurred. A big tool for us is to sit back and say, what contingencies can I arrange? If I want behavior A, then I should arrange a prompt for it, a nudge, to say do it, more or less, not so directive, and that a consequence, a boost, follows it. And if you sit back and say, whenever my child helps me clear the table, I'm going to thank them right away, then you've arranged a contingency. It's just maybe in your head, but you could actually write it down. And when I find you could write down, when I look at my boy's room in the morning after he's left for school, maybe, or while he's still eating breakfast in the kitchen, and I find it clean to these kinds of measures, bedspread, clothes off the floor and stuff, then I will go down and thank him and give him a little extra dessert for his lunch, his school lunch. So you've thought about it, thought about the behavior you want when you want it. You thought about boosts, things that are valuable and positive to the person themselves, and you arranged it. Say, Under these circumstances, these behaviors will be followed by those consequences. That's a contingency. Well, when I first started writing about contingency, the pod just couldn't, could not. So I wrote it 14 different ways until finally they said, aha, now we've got it. And I said, okay, this is the test. Say what it is. And they sent it back to me. So yes, I got a lot of shaping over the years and finally got a product that was written, I guess, as well as I can, and in published quality.
Did you enjoy the process?
I enjoyed it very much.
Mhm.
Yeah, it takes some discipline, much like studying, like I've mentioned a number of times, that helping your kids study, arrange a place and a time, arrange materials, and should arrange some consequences for doing well at studying or writing. So I picked a time during the day, a place during the day, and then I had a structure for how I got back into the writing that I was doing. And I had prompts, nudges all over the place like I do in front of me here in the studio you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
Out there you can't see, and here we can see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I set it up. I set up my own contingencies, and that we can call self-control. If you decide a behavior you want when you want it, and you decide on a consequence you can deliver yourself for doing behaviors that you want, that's a self-control contingency.
So how did you handle the criticism?
With humor, I think. That actually is a little bit of a challenge.
Mhm.
I don't think anybody likes to be told that was really dumb.
Mhm.
You know, maybe if it said it in a humorous way, it's more acceptable.
They didn't come right out and say that was dumb, did they? A few times
Are you
they did.
listening? No. Really, it's a wonderful social support atmosphere. But handling it is, I think it's a self-discipline that you should sit back and determine before you get into it.
Yeah.
And I actually sat back and I said, do I really want people to read my stuff? I'm kind of afraid of it because I'm not formally trained. I don't know grammar and syntax and other technical features of writing. And so I was a little worried about it and worried about whether they'd like or appreciate what I was writing. And I decided, I said to myself, I don't have to join, but if I do, then I've got to take it well and smile and write a note and use it.
Seemed like you got through it.
I got through it, and the book is a wonderful improved product because of it. Right now, let's take a brief break. This program is brought to you by the book authored by Dr. Bob Crow entitled Nudge and Boost for Better Living. Get more information or buy at www.nudgeandboost.com. The Writers Alliance of Gainesville promotes, encourages, and supports aspiring and experienced regional writers. Through activities of informative meetings, workshops, and writer support groups, they encourage writers to rise to their potential. Visit their website at writersalliance.org.
You're listening to Nudge and Boost for Better Living with Dr. Bob Crow on the Talk of Gainesville, 104.9 FM.
Teach your children well. Their father's help did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams. The one they picked, the one you know by.
So the topic after that inspirational piece is accurately called incidental teaching. In incidental teaching, the nudging and boosting that we've been talking about focuses on the boosting aspect. Essentially, incidental teaching is watching a person of interest, like your child or a coworker or maybe even your boss, for behaviors that you've decided beforehand are desired. So maybe you want your child to play better with other kids, or you'd like your coworker to be more friendly or helpful in some way, or your boss to be more positive in his interactions with you. Well, those are labels for behaviors. They aren't behaviors. So you're going to have to spend some time nailing them down. I'm trying to emphasize behavioral definitions are the foundation for going forward with improving our lives. You must invest effort to define behaviorally observable, measurable behaviors that you're looking for your child sharing. What does sharing mean? Well, maybe that is such a simple term that anyone would recognize it, but you spend a bit of time talking about sharing, that like handing a toy to another child or thanking the other child for playing with them. And then your coworker, you might want to define what you want from them to be simply smiles or even words that they say that are recognizable as positive. Or doing things like in the break room, they pick up some of the trash that maybe is their own or others. So now your boss, I don't know what you're going to define about what your boss should do with you, but you can think of it. I would like my boss to say to me that he observed something I did and appreciated it. So if I could watch for him doing that sort of thing to me, and then I should have, from an incidental teaching perspective, I should have a menu, a kit bag of boosts that I can use right away that I've, for some reason, concluded would be positive. The ways to determine whether something is positive or not might be to directly observe, to see what people do often. The child might like to play with a particular toy that's not available at the time, but you notice that whenever the toy is available, they do play with it. You can ask a coworker quite directly, are you interested in hearing a joke? You can assume that some things like smiling or even words of appreciation are positive. Your boss probably making eye contact, smiling and nodding is probably an effective boost for them. So if you have now a collection, a menu of boosts that you are ready to use, and you have a collection of behaviors that you're looking for, now you're prepared to do incidental teaching. Now your primary task becomes one of observing. So you do have the behaviors in mind, and you do have the consequences in mind, and you observe. And you pretty well constantly observe. And you happen to notice the child then is playing with another child, and you immediately smile, wave a thank you, go move over and give the child a hug, and maybe if the toy is an important thing to present this new toy or an old favorite. So incidental teaching amounts to having in mind behaviors that are desired, having in mind consequences that are pretty well proven one way or another to be effective, desired by the person whose behavior you're trying to strengthen. Then observe for those behaviors, and when they occur, boost them. Now, this style of teaching, incidental teaching, is happening to us all the time. People, but informally. People are interacting with us. You see others. You see even your pets doing things, and as a function of you do something else, like thanking them. The difference between thoughtfully approaching it, so it's called incidental teaching, and informally, casually, unconsciously, unsystematically interacting with people that may include boosting consequences that strengthen behavior, is that in one case you're using it as a tool explicitly to move in a direction you desire, and the other is haphazard. I'm advocating very strongly for using incidental teaching systematically for your own benefit and the benefit of others. Let's take another view of incidental teaching, or in fact, if you're even formally planning and writing down contingencies, as I mentioned earlier in the program, one of the pieces of equipment you have available for you, I call the consequences box. And it is a box with 4 little boxes. So it's a large box with 4 chambers in it. Cells, we might call them, although that sounds so negative. In those cells, now blank, you and I will fill in what they stand for, what they mean for us in behavioral terms. Now, to the left of the box are two sets of words. One set of words is desired behaviors. The other set of words is not desired behaviors. So they are to the left of the box, and on the top edge of the box is positive and negative. Down the sides of the box is more of or less of. So now you have to picture that. You have a box, has 4 cells in it. Across the top, positive and negative. Down the sides, more of, less of. So now let's fill in the box. So if you say something positive, you get more of it. So one of those cells is more of positive. That's positive reinforcement. Now another cell is negative, less of. So that's negative reinforcement. Very confusing to call it that, but it is a form of reinforcement. And when I talk in the book about boosts, that's what I'm talking about. Those two cells of adding more positive or removing negative. So those are boosts. The other two cells, taking away positive or adding negative, are two forms of punishment. Okay, so let's remember to the left, there are two sets of words, desired behaviors and not desired behaviors. And it doesn't take a magician to figure out that the not desired behaviors could be followed by more negative or taking away positive, and that punishes them. And of course, what we've been emphasizing for shows and throughout the book is boosting. And so it's wise to recognize that the term to the left that says desired behaviors is followed by more positive or less negative. And it gets kind of hairy. Let's deal first with the two forms of punishment. Now, a problem with punishment is it does not teach. At least not what you want to be happening. It might teach things like resentment or an interest in escaping the environment, or a hatred for the person who's doing the punishing, or a dislike or hatred for the circumstances, like maybe a classroom in which punishment is happening, and then the classroom becomes more negative. So let's just forget about punishment. It's too messy, too unpleasant, unproductive. Let's just focus on boosting. That's kind of compatible with the name of the book. That if you want behaviors, the desired behaviors, then you can strengthen them by adding positive or removing negative. And removing negative is something that, unfortunately, we do fairly often. And it's worth then some close attention. If you bawl out a child, stop that. That was a bad thing. I'm embarrassed. You've disrespected me. I can't hold my head up in public as well now that you did that. Never do it again. Very bad thing. Bad for you, bad for all of us. Sooner or later, you're going to stop that negative tirade. You're going to stop it. So at the point that it is removed, the behavior is strengthened. That's negative reinforcement. Anytime you punish by applying a negative like scolding, then you do sometime reinforce by stopping it. So at the point you stop should be a desirable behavior. That's just a warning. You're best off if you just focus on identifying positive boosts and presenting them following desired behaviors. So I'll remind listeners that the emphasis of this segment of this show was on incidental teaching, that is, to observe for and provide boosts for desirable behaviors. With that in mind, I'll leave you with some inspirational music.
Now is the time. Now is the time for all good men to get together with one another, iron out their problems and iron out their quarrels, and try to live as brothers, and try to find peace within without stepping on one another. respect of the women of the world, just remember we all had mothers.
Make this land a better land in the world in which we live.
And help each man be a better man with the kindness that you give. And I know we can make it.
I know that we can.
I know done well we can work it out.
Oh yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can. Why can't we if we wanna? Yes we can.
I know we can make it work.
I know that we can.
I know we can make it if we try.
Oh yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can. Great gosh almighty. Yes we can. I know we can.
Take care of the children of the world. They're our strongest hope for the future, the little bit of boys and girls. And make this land a better land and the world in which we live. And help each man be a better man with the kindness that you give. And I know we can make it.
I know that we can.
I know done well we can work it out.
Oh yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can. Why can't we if we wanna? Yes we can.
I know we can make it
I know
work.
that we can.
I know we can make it if we try.
Oh yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can. Great gosh almighty. Yes we can. I know we can.
Take care of the children of the world. They're our strongest hope for the future, the little bitty boys and girls.
Make this land a better land in the world in which we live.
And help each man be a better man with the kindness that you give. And I know we can make it.
I know that we can.
I know darn well that we can work it out.
Oh yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can. Why can't we if we wanna? Yes we can.
I know we can make it
I
work.
know that we can.
I know we can make it if we try.
Oh yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can. Great gosh almighty. Yes we can. I know we can.
Oh, yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Why can't we if we wanna? Yes we can.
Oh, yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Great gosh almighty.
Yes we can. I know we can. Oh, yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Why can't we if we wanna?
Yes we can. Oh, yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Great gosh almighty.
Yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Why can't
we if we wanna? Yes we can. Oh, yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Great gosh almighty.
Yes we can. I know we can. Oh, yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Why can't we if we wanna?
Yes we can. Oh, yes we can. I know we can. Yes we can.
Great gosh almighty. Yes we can. I know we can.
You can buy Dr. Crow's book, Nudge and Boost for Better Living, at createspace.com. Save $3 using the code ALDLS, 32L. Save $3 at createspace.com on Nudge and Boost for Better Living. The Writers Alliance of Gainesville promotes, encourages, and supports aspiring and experienced regional writers. Through activities of informative meetings, workshops, and writer support groups, they encourage writers to rise to their potential. Visit their website at writersalliance.org. Alachua County Library District will host its third annual author series featuring renowned and emerging authors. Each author will speak, answer questions, and sign books. I put myself among the emerging authors. For more information, visit the website at aclib.us. I invite you to learn to use proven strategies called nudging and boosting for building a more positive and successful style of living. Tune in Tuesdays 5 to 6 p.m. to hear me, Dr. Bob Crow, talk about nudge and boost for better living.
You're listening to Nudge and Boost for Better Living with Dr. Bob Crow on the Talk of Gainesville, 104.9 FM.
I do believe in you, and I know you believe in me. Oh yeah, oh yeah. But now we've realized love not all that it's supposed to be. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Knowing that you would have wanted it this way. I do believe I'm feeling stronger every day. I know we really tried. Together we had love inside. Oh yeah, oh yeah. So now the time has come for both of us to live on the run. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And knowing that you would have wanted it this way, I do believe I'm feeling stronger every day. Yeah, yeah, After what you meant to me, ooh baby, now I can't make it easily. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Know that we both love you. Let's leave it up to you. Let's leave it up to me.
I invite you to learn to use proven strategies called nudging and boosting for building a more positive and successful style of living.